If the council members would take their places, we will resume the meeting.
They haven't changed.
And I would like to ask the Director of Finance to provide an overview of the amounts for Attachment A.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. The bottom line number that you're looking at right now with these four assumptions is 238,300,000. And those assumptions are 60 million for economic development over the life of the tax, 4.9 added back in for Topeka Boulevard, 7.5 million for infill sidewalks, and then the rest of Mr. Schmidt's numbers included in that aggregate total.
Okay. Council members, any questions? Any understanding on that? So we would say, this is the motion before us are these figures. Are we in agreement on that? If we pass the substitute motion, these are the figures that we are approving. I'm just looking, make sure that, no, okay?
The substitute motion that I moved for and was seconded doesn't include those figures. It would have to be amended in order to represent those numbers.
Okay, so,
The resolution has those in them, but the attachment A that we're considering right now does not currently have those numbers in it. The number for attachment A right now is 240.9 million.
okay. Would there someone to keep this moving forward, move to make those changes? Mr. Brown?
Yes, I move to make the changes, reducing economic development to 60 million. We should add 4.9 million for Topeka Boulevard Bridge. We add 7.5.
Mike?
To add 7.5 million for infill sidewalks, and then in keeping with the rest of Mr. Smith's proposal.
Is there a second? Ms. Elisa seconds.
I would
I'm
like,
sorry. Go ahead, you have a question.
so sorry,
No, go
yes.
ahead, you have a
I
question.
think that the challenge that we're having right now, I would second the motion, but we have to make two motions separate. One, because attachment A does not include the 60 million that I have been mentioning. Attachment A only includes the projects that Mr. Schmidt has presented. So we would have to make a motion, yes,
Mhm.
making the amendments and approving them. Then we would have to make a second motion, reducing the amount that would be for economic development for 60 million. If Mr. Brown would so accept the amendment of the motion to just approve attachment A with the amendments, I would second.
Okay. And actually, thank you for bringing that up. That was discussed during the break, but somehow between then and now, we didn't get it accomplished. So what she is suggesting, council, that we only we're only including in this motion the Topeka Boulevard Bridge and the infill sidewalks.
Is that Councilman Brown's motion?
Yes,
Yes, that is my motion. Thank you. Thank you
So-
for the clarification.
and that we will not be we're not including the economic development because that's not on the attachment A.
Not on this motion.
Not on
correct.
this motion, correct. And then you would second it.
Yes,
So
sir.
Ms. Delisla seconds this. Okay, council, is this, if you have questions. So we have before us then attachment A as presented by Mr. Schmidt with those two additions of amounts. And, yes,
I do have a question. I passed around a little earlier an amendment that I'd like to add to the Rochester Road line so that it would, if dollars were available, accommodate the Button Road project as well. Would that be, I don't think we can do a second amendment, so that would need to wait until this motion has come through fully and,
Okay.
and add it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Mr. Schmidt?
Well, I have a couple questions. First, do I have to allow amendments? Do I have to approve amendments to my
No, well,
own
we have,
attachment?
I'm sorry, yes, you have to approve, you have to agree to the amendment made by Mr. Brown, which is to include the Topeka Boulevard and infill sidewalks at those amounts.
I think I'm going to have to object to that because, and I'll explain my reasoning, it's not because I object to adding those two items into it, but it's based on the assumption that a further amendment to the interlocal agreement will come later. So we're essentially forcing two votes at that time. I think the way that I would prefer to do it is that if we're going to add money in for any projects, that we would do that and we would remove money from attachment A to fund those. And then after we pass an attachment A and move on to the issue of economic development, I believe at that point we can then revisit funding, if that funding changes. Would that be a fair way to do that, legal?
I have Mr. Legal, another question to you.
I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're saying. We'd be adding the two projects in, not putting the amounts in, dealing with economic development, and then coming back to it to put the amounts in. Is that correct?
Well, what I'm saying, what I object to is if we vote on the proposed amendment as is right now, we're essentially forcing two votes because the amendment as proposed would require a further amendment after the attachment A is passed. So my preference would be for us to balance attachment A before we move back onto the greater resolution or the greater interlocal agreement as a whole.
I guess that would be a question for finance of, if we add 7.5 million in for infill sidewalks, the 4.9 for Topeka Boulevard, and we keep economic development the same, what does that number look like?
Mr. Mayor, that number becomes 253,300,000.
Okay, yeah, so we do have this equation. Ms. Delisma?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. My question was going to be to legal at this point in time. Would it then be adequate to just start by asking the question outside of Exhibit A and asking if the body would have an interest in reducing economic development and making that substitute motion rather than the one that we have on the floor?
Just having the discussion?
Having the discussion and maybe changing the motion that was set out to a substitute motion of looking at economic development.
There has to be an acceptance and a vote on the motion that's on the floor. We can't kind of change it as we go.
Okay.
Mr. Schmidt?
I have a possible solution, Chad, Mr. Sublette.
I'd love to hear it.
If I were to withdraw my motion to amend attachment A, and which would take us back to the interlocal agreement, then we could do that, and then I could resubmit my motion to amend attachment A after we look at the interlocal agreement. Would that make things easier for everybody?
That would make life much easier to deal with the interlocal first, deal with the economic development money, and then go back to attachment A, yes.
And who
I withdraw my motion.
made the second?
Brown.
I'm sorry?
Brown.
Brown. Do you agree? All right. We are now back on the original motion to approve the interlocal agreement, which is item 5B And that motion was made by Mr. Schmidt, and I believe seconded by Mr. Brown.
Yes.
The original motion.
Yes.
So we have before us the interlocal agreement, which includes, among other things, the, I don't know,
Economic development.
if you have that in front of you there. It's on page 55. Mr. Brown, Mr. Schmidt.
I would also point out that we do have a public comment on,
Yes, I thought we would move through this somewhat, but when we have public comment on it. But since you mentioned it, we can go to that now. We have two persons who signed for public comment. The first is Joe Ledbetter.
Governing body, thank you. Joseph Ledbetter. Last time this was before us, I expressed some concerns about the interlocal agreement as was proposed by the county, and of course, this one's somewhat modified. I think I'll first just speak quickly to attachment A. One of the things that we need to be aware of with the expo is just the vast amount of deferred maintenance that has not been done over there. And I'm not plugging it. I'm simply saying we got there for a reason. We got there because it was not maintained by the county. And the numbers that I've heard are as high as $10 million of just deferred maintenance. And that's shocking. So please don't do that to the city streets. You know, I mean, well, we already saw that. But this deferred maintenance becomes incredibly expensive and compounded over time. And it's really a sign of poor management, in my opinion. On the county bridges, I know that you're not going to tell them specifically which projects to do, but if this is all for one bridge, then I would like the county to specify that. You know, if it is for Carlson, then just say so. Don't leave the county residents wondering, well, what bridge is this, or what bridges is this? If it's just one bridge or two bridges, list them. You know, be transparent with what you're doing. You know, specify the projects and give the amounts. I like the idea of reducing the economic development to $4 million, and I'll tell you why. Because historically, I've looked at their carryovers. Topeka has horrible carryovers. I know in '08, you can go back and check this and see if I'm right, because it's all online now, the JADO minutes. But they carried over, I believe it was $12.5 million, which is really 2.5 years' budget. And I remember a county commissioner at that time saying, well, that's no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. Because if you don't need the money, why am I giving it to you? And why are you tying it up year after year? So much of our precious tax money. And I think the latest one, I could be wrong on this, is about 10 million. But while they can justify a little of that, they cannot justify all of it, not anywhere close. And they take that out of disadvantaged funds, people that need it the most, the 10%. They don't spend that one historically, all of it. So I think 4 million is more in line with what is manageable to the Topeka model that we're currently under, unfortunately. And I think that there's good reason to trim that based on their own performance or lack of it. On the agreement, I got to hurry up here. I still oppose this 15 years. I think it's way too long. That's in your first page. Section 5, JADO shall have authority to contract with an independent contractor. I'd like to see and an independent auditor to direct and oversee the economic development program. Well, not oversee, that would be a wrong word, but I would like an independent auditor. On the 3-year, limited to 3 years, I think that's an outside number. You might want to make it less in the future. but it should always be subject to the Kansas cash basis law. And on the last sentence of paragraph 5, in addition, any such contract shall include a requirement that the contractor, time up.
Yes.
I'm gonna ask for a, just a 2-minute extension. I probably don't even need that.
Motion to extend for 2 minutes.
It's been moved by Mr. Manspeaker to extend for 2 minutes. Ms. Delisle seconds. Discussion, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 9 yes.
Nine
Thank
having
you.
voted yes, please continue.
On this last sentence, I'm gonna read it into the record. In addition to any such contract, that's under paragraph 5, any such contract shall include a requirement that the contractor respond promptly to inquiries from both voting and non-voting members of the board. Obviously, I'd like to see that extended to the public because we're the ones paying the money. But this word promptly bothers me. Because you and I may think prompt means, yeah, I'll get it to you today, or yeah, the city manager said he'll get it to me, he's gonna get it to me tomorrow or the day after. With Go Topeka, they literally don't know what that means. So I'd like to define it for them, and I'll define it under the definitions of the Kansas Open Records Act. 72 hours is sufficient time to provide answers to any of you that want answers. Period. And I tell you, I don't think I have to sell that. You just need to do it. It'll be a great CYA for you later on. You may wish you had it. When they tell you promptly means whatever they think, or means they'll get back to you next week or next month. Or I've had a request into them for 3 months, asking how much space they rent from the Chamber of Commerce. And I still, as of today, I got another email. I don't know. Well, I know you may not know, but somebody knows, and if you don't know, go figure it out. After all, you're highly paid. So I think, you know, the most basic things we ask for is just square footage on a lease. And now I've asked for a copy of the lease. I wonder if that exists. But anyway, I have asked for that. But this is really a key word. So, I mean, if you can't accept anything else I'm saying up here tonight, please think about defining that word promptly. And just for your own self, so that in the future, if a constituent says, I need something, you'll get it. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ledbetter. Mr. Dan Ramlo, I don't see him. I believe he has left. So we are now on the discussion of the interlocal agreement. And that is in the, starting on page 55 in the booklet the additional booklet that we received. You've expressed interest in the economic development amount. I believe I see that on, you know where that is? Okay, Ms. Delisle.
I would like to make a motion reducing the amount proposed for economic development from 75 million to 60 million.
Okay, I know on page 59, in paragraph 4, it says that we do $5 million a year. I
can do
think
that
that's,
before.
I think that's what we would need to change in this with your, I think that's the intent of your motion.
Yeah,
Mr. Salvet.
if I may, yes, it would be reduced to 4 million, and then the installments would be reduced to $333,333,000. Is that correct? Okay, so
Okay.
there's different places in the document that refer to that installment, so I just wanted the body to know what that number would be.
Okay, so we're together on that. She has made that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Manspeaker seconds. Is there discussion? Ms. Schwartz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel you have to bear with me and my allergies. Has anyone discussed this with the JETO board or with the chamber or with the Go Topeka board if we reduced their income down?
Ms. Delisle?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. No, this has not been, for my part, discussed with Go Topeka or the chamber. at this point in time. However, this is based on my experience being on the JADO board the last year and having seen that there have been carryovers. In addition to that, one of the discussions that has been made is the fact that there is a 10% of those dollars that are supposed to be utilized for certain things that have never been sufficed. So not only that, but as we have been hearing presentations from Go Topeka themselves, they have discussed how they have changed their strategy with regards on how they're approaching economic development for the future for our city. That being said, there is not so much need as there was before to look at land and to look at the big amounts of investments that were being utilized to purchase land to secure that we were going to bring over corporations. Now, that being said, the JADO body, in turn, now with these changes, has an opportunity to take a look at how the constituent dollars are going to be utilized and how they could better serve the community. So have we ran that by them? No, and it's not that I have any animosity. I have high respect and high regard for what the chamber does, but at the same time, I am sitting here with, as a policymaker, taking a look at the needs that our community has and trying to ensure that we, at the same time, balance our budget, but also serve the purposes that we need of growing our community economically.
I would like to say one point pertaining to the carryover. Much, or I think a significant part of the carryover each year is what has already been committed. For instance, I know we have further commitments significant to Mars, and that's paid out on a yearly basis. So I think there are several million involved in that. They have to meet certain goals to get those payments. And I know because much of there's not sometimes that much money available, although it looks like we have all these reserves, but they're committed. So there are things like that it's just, there are various aspects of this. Yeah, Mr. Manspeaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we still have a JETO Finance Committee?
Yeah,
Yes,
and-
yes.
And who serves on
We
that?
have to have that.
Who serves on that committee from our side, from the city?
It's defined in the interlocal agreement.
It's in the interlocal agreement. It lists the people who are on the,
Is it you? Well, I guess my question would be if our person from the Finance Committee was here, they could probably speak directly to the carryovers so that we understood what those were allocated towards and what they were not allocated towards.
now that's on page 58. It says the Finance Committee is composed of Shawnee County Public Works Director, the Topeka Public Works Director, Shawnee County Financial Administrator, and the Topeka City Manager or his designee. Yes. Okay, I know, you have your hand up. I thought you were waiting to be,
Pointing to him.
you were waiting to be acknowledged. Mr. Gerber.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Kaufman serves as the city manager designee.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, preliminary audited statements for 2013 show a carryover of 9.7 million.
Is any of that committed?
Just briefly looking at the audited statements, I could not tell that any of that amount was committed.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, Ms. Schwartz.
One more question. So what this does is takes away 1 million a year for 15 years. That's 15 million.
Mhm.
Okay.
Ms. Zeller?
So to clarify, you're feeling that in the future, we will not, besides the carryovers, that we would be changing, or we should explore changing how we're doing the economic development program? And that, for instance, we might not need the big dollars that we've used in the past for development of, for instance, industrial parks and things like that, that's a way that we would change the program and be able to function without that high level of dollars?
Mr. Mayor. Ms. Hiller, at this point in time, this is a function of the JADO body to determine and to give instruction to Go Topeka on how better allocate those funds. I think that as a scholar of economic development, I've been working, as you know, for many years in the economic development realm. And not only that, one of the benefits of being in a great program like Leadership Kansas is looking at different models of economic development throughout the state. The old model of just purchasing land is not something that's looked at right now. There is a lot of looking into technologies, there's a lot of looking into technical schools, there's a lot of looking into small enterprise. I am not saying that we do not appreciate at all the contributions of major corporations in our community. I love Mars, I love Target, I love Frito-Lay and Pepsi-Cola, they're all in my district. However, aside from working on retention with our current organizations, I think that when you're looking at the state of economic development throughout the state and throughout the nation, it has a very different feel. This is not only what I am estimating from my search and on my own education, but also by what has been reported by the chamber themselves when they produced the last report when I was here as a JADO board member, in which they talked about changing their way that they were going to approach economic development for the future. So just, again, making remarks based on comments that I heard as a JADO body member, and also just as looking at the state of the economy. But I cannot make those determinations. Those are things that the JADO body would then have an opportunity to explore and have food to have discussions that are very healthy with regards to where we're going to go in the future and how we're going to maximize our tax dollars.
Thank you, thank you.
I guess I would say I'm concerned and would not support this, making this decision tonight to reduce it by 20%. I think we've had, in my opinion, many successes in economic development with our 5 million each year, in a sense, for 10 years and even before that. Of course, there's always ways to look at it. And I think Topeka is changing what it is doing because of new interests in the community. For instance, particularly going with the entrepreneur work that is being done, looking more at small business. They're responding to the needs of the community and also the recommendations from the JADO board. So I question whether we want to make a 20% reduction or recommend this to the county, that we make a 20% reduction. I think that it would seriously harm what we have done and could continue to do in economic development. Mr. Schmidt?
I applaud the idea that we need to change our economic development model, and I've been at those JADO meetings and heard you speak on that, and I've spoken on that as well. I have seen changes in the way Topeka is doing things, and they have changed from a model of bringing land acquisition or using land acquisition as the central tenet of economic development. I can't support this for a couple reasons. One, that I would need to hear from Topeka and the JADO board on what the impact of a 20% cut to their budget would be. I also think it's important to recognize that we've had a huge amount of success over the last 10 years in economic development, largely because we have this tool, which not all communities have, that we go out and we actively as a community have dedicated money and efforts to that endeavor, to bringing economic development into this city. We've done that at a level of $5 million a year for 10 years. $5 million 10 years ago was a lot more than $5 million is today. What we're proposing now is $5 million per year, another 15 years out. So that proposal, in a sense, is cutting the current budget more than in half over the 15-year life cycle of this tax. We would be cutting the purchasing power of the Topeka budget in half already without taking another 20% of that off of it. So I would need to see the impact of that from Topeka and from JADO in order to support this. So I can't support it at this time, but I do applaud the new efforts that we're making in economic development.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Manspeaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I applaud the efforts of my colleague, and I think she's very correct in her assessment of the money. I also like the fact that she makes the point that we're in charge of deciding how much Go Topeka spends on economic development. So we technically don't ever need to check with them because they're our contractor. And so really it's up to this body and the county to decide what they think the right investment per year should be, and that's part of why we get elected. So I think that's great. But I also would say that there is a shift in economic development. I would say we take this money and we invest it in infill sidewalks, we invest it in trails, we invest it in bikeways. We're sort of cutting the middleman out of job creation and just doing it ourselves, which I'm kind of okay with, because $1 million spent in our community that here or there is going to create jobs. We just do it more directly, and we probably impact folks who need the jobs. Thanks.
Ms. Delisla.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Manspeaker, for your comments. The one thing that I would like to emphasize with regards to the approach that I'm taking here and the recommendations that I'm making is the fact that we should not be personalizing Go Topeka. Never once have I diminished or questioned their successes. Never one have I put in question their integrity. I am just stating that as a policymaker, we were, like Mr. Manspeaker very well said, elected to make sure that we are making the best and wisest use of the dollars that our constituents are bringing in. When I look back at the comments that we heard over and over again when we had our listening tour with regards to how the half-cent sales tax were going to be allocated, we heard a lot of concern with regards to the economic development funds. Something else that I think that was addressed as well is the fact that when we look at economic development, we have to look at the quality of our city and the infrastructure that we have. And if we have the ability to ensure that we have better quality of life, then we would attract those businesses. That is one of the premises that we utilized when we started doing the work with downtown. When we are working to improve our community, we work to improve our viability. I've had conversations even with officials of Go Topeka in which, in that conversation, I had a lot of concern with regards to what the situation is with the airport. When that happened, the first comment that I got was, the airport is something that we're looking into. However, we have to understand that a lot of people are still living in Lawrence. I don't want people to live in Lawrence. I want people to live in Topeka. And the only way that we're going to get people to stay in Topeka is if we start looking at economic development from a holistic approach. And the way that we do that is to invest dollars where our constituents are going to use them most. Our constituents said they want to see these quality of life issues approached. And I'm just trying to remind the body that this is what our constituency said, and that we are not taking a lot of money when you look at the big scheme of things from Go Topeka, that we're just looking at giving them better tools, different tools and different ways of looking at things and how to invest the dollars that we are tasked with allocating to them.
Other comments? We have before us the amendment to the interlocal agreement, reducing the amount for economic development. Is there other discussion?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brown.
Yes, thank you. I'm not gonna go into everything that everybody else has already gone into.
Thank you.
But I'm gonna go back to why we're having this discussion, which is funding these other projects. So I'm gonna go back to the one that was dearest to my heart, which was infill sidewalks. It not only is that an infrastructure project, but it's one that directly affects those who have the least mobility in our community. This particular project is designed to create paths for the disabled and children and seniors to get where they need to get to get the groceries, to go to school, and to do all these other things. I want to see Topeka blossom and grow through economic development, but I don't believe that we can't do that with $60 million instead of $75 million, so I will support this.
Okay, thank you. Other discussion? Mr. Schmidt?
I just want to make one final point. We are not cutting or adding, we're not funding Go Topeka for $75 million or $60 million here tonight. We're taking 10 years of an existing program, and we're putting it before the voters to decide if they want to continue that or not continue that. I'm perfectly fine with whatever decision they come up with if we put this on the November ballot. What we're doing by cutting this right now is pretty much killing this, because it's probably not going to pass county muster if we cut a further 20% out of Go Topeka. So I think we need to be clear what we're doing here. We're not cutting or adding money to Go Topeka or to economic development. We're proposing a proposal that's going to go before the voters to decide if they think it's effective and if they think it's been done well over the past 10 years. There's a lot of people that work at Mars and that work at the distribution centers and the other places around town that probably do think it is. And there's probably a lot of people that don't think it's working. But that's the choice that I think we should give to the voters. And I think we should consider that when we're making this vote, because essentially what we're doing is we're voting on whether or not we're going to have a half-cent sales tax proposal or not. Every proposal that's been proposed so far has included at least $5 million for economic development. I find it to be not very likely that right before, in the last chance that we have before this has to be submitted for the ballot, that we're going to all of a sudden change probably the central focus of the economic, or of the entire sales tax before that. So that's what we're voting on. We're not voting on whether we like or don't like how Go Topeka has handled that money. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Schmidt. I'm making no judgment on Go Topeka's past performance. I'm simply stating that I think we can go forward with $60 million, and again, I will support it.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, Mrs. Everhart?
Well, I'll be quick. I'm going to support this, and it's not because I don't support economic development. I want to see the city grow. But I am concerned that there are such large carryovers. I think $9 million in 1 year, with somebody telling me that it's not encumbered, it's not in reserve for anything. When if it passed with the 75 million, I mean, I just don't see how 9 million in carryover in 1 year. To me, that tells me, maybe it can be reduced a little at this point in time, and most of my constituents think so. So, I have to take that into consideration. That doesn't mean I'm not supportive of all of the things they've done with Mars and Target Distribution. I think those have been great additions. But it also concerns me that some of the disadvantaged and minority business and things, the money's not been given out. And there's something lacking there. So now, yeah, that's to the JADO board, but what we're doing, and I guess I appreciate what you said, this is going to go on a ballot initiative, so ultimately the voters decide. But it's also going back over to the county, and the county may not agree with the city position. And if they don't, then we're going to have to work something out. But this is just what the city council thinks, or the governing body at this point in time thinks those dollars should be. That's what we're talking about. I don't know whether the county's going to agree.
Mr. Colson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so we as a body have made a commitment of practicing based on informed decision-making, and I'm not taking a position one way or the other. I've actually appreciated sitting back here and listening to this dialogue, but we don't know what the carryover represents. We don't know whether it actually is encumbered funds. When Mr. Kaufman spoke, he said he didn't know. And so I don't know that we should have an idea as to whether it's a carry forward for certain land purchases in the future or obligations that we made. We just don't know, and I don't think we should act here today as if we do. We certainly could very quickly but not in the time that this vote's gonna occur.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt?
That was the point that I wanted to make. It wasn't said that the $9 million carryover was unencumbered. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but having been present when they presented their budgets, I'm pretty sure most of that is committed. He said he didn't know that it was unencumbered.
Yeah.
And if he would be willing to clarify that, I would.
I don't know what, do you want to
Yeah, Mr.
restate?
Mayor and members of the council, I think part of the confusion may be between what's on Go Topeka's books and what's on JADO's books. So the 9.7 million, to my knowledge, is there are no commitments toward that. However, on the Go Topeka books, they may have some cash carryover there too, where there are future commitments that they are obliged to pay towards. So yes, on Go Topeka, no, there are not commitments on the 9.7 million carryover for JADO. Does that clarify? Okay.
I'm thinking, we contribute on a monthly basis to JADO. So, and then the funds, as there comes a need for them, the finance committee approves their expenditure. So I know it's probably moving here in something. Okay, is there other discussion on the motion? Ms. Ziller?
I want to echo what Councilwoman Everhart said. I think it was well-spoken. And I appreciate just bringing this up because I think it's opened up some really healthy discussion. Maybe it's too big an issue to actually decide tonight, and at least understanding that we're sending a communication across the street to the county, and there might be more discussion about the issue before it ever goes to the voters as well. We also have the option, if we really want to consider it and think it's premature, to not vote on it tonight and instead have a presentation with more information and discussion about that very issue and perhaps some others in the interlocal agreement as well, if we're opening up some issues we want to ponder further.
We have a motion. We have
For
a
the
motion.
same reason, I will support it if it goes to a vote tonight that Councilwoman Everhart.
All right. Mr. Manspeaker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find it fascinating that none of us know if the money is committed or not committed year to year. I just pulled up the Growth Organization of Topeka, Shawnee County forecasted statement of receipts and disbursements cash basis for December 31st, 2014. And it says
Just forward commitment.
when you have encumbered funds or you have funds that are committed, they're actually line itemed
Right.
in the budget. So I would expect that if there were funds that existed outside of those encumbered funds, they would be shown separately, which there are transfers, holdovers, investments, and land held for development is the holdover money at the bottom. But the commitments that need to be made, from what I can tell, looking at this budget, they are in the line item, they're not in the holdover. So, I mean, my problem is that JETO doesn't need a ending balance to make sure their bond rating stays decent. I mean, if we're gonna collect this money, we ought to spend this money each year that we have it. So reducing it by 1 million doesn't hurt anybody other than making a different investment into our community. It's not that it diminishes their value or diminishes their success. If they're holding over as much money as they are reporting year to year, that's a significant sum. If this city council was under budget by about $9 million, I think our constituents would be a little confused as to what we were doing. So all of our money's accounted for, every dollar. I don't know why you need to have extra money in the bank when it comes to economic development year to year. Thank you.
Mrs. Hiller?
That point raises perhaps why we need to talk about this further. Something we need to keep in mind, and I've read the sheets as you did, is that they are nearing the end of a 12-year plan and still need to be pursuing in the various ways that they have, various companies. And they typically make forward commitments of a number of years. And so having carryover at this juncture makes sense in that otherwise there wouldn't be much to do the last couple of years of a 12-year plan if you didn't have any money coming in. So if we had a discussion with them, we might get that answer. And
Thank
I
you.
understand that.
Mr. Schmidt?
I would also point out that in the JADO meetings that we were at, that a large portion, I don't remember what the exact number of it, a large portion of that reserve was held because there are several hundred acres of land that Go Topeka holds options on around the Kansas Prairie development site. And if they were to get a prospect to come in, they have the right to buy that land, and a large portion of those funds are reserved for that purpose.
Thank you. Is there other discussion? We have before us the motion is to reduce the Economic Development Fund. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. I vote no.
We have 5 yes and 5 no.
Okay, it does not pass, these 6 votes. So we have before us the interlocal agreement. And this would be, if we're back to, in a sense, attachment A. Mr. Schmidt?
Now I would like to make a motion to put forward my substitute attachment A for consideration.
Okay, it's been moved that a substitute motion that the attachment A attached to his resolution become the attachment A with the interlocal agreement. Is there a second?
Sure.
Mrs. Hiller seconds. We're open for discussion.
Now, where are we exactly with?
Okay, we have the attachment A, that's actually the one that's attached to his resolution is the one that has been moved. In our previous discussion, we added 2 items, infill sidewalks and Topeka Boulevard. So in a sense, we are back to determining the approximate amount of money that we would put into those. And we would have to reduce something by a similar amount to make that possible. Mr. Schmidt?
And I believe the way, given the passage of the resolution earlier, we have $240.9 million worth of projects funded. We have 2 additional projects authorized with no funding. Those would be the Topeka Avenue and the infill site. So if we were to pass this, those sites or those objects wouldn't be funded the way I understand it.
Well.
That was a question.
That, if I may,
Yes.
you have the 2 projects in there. I believe we have a projection of what this tax will generate. If the tax underperforms, there'll be projects that aren't completed. If the tax overperforms, there'll be a split for different projects. So, essentially, you could put those in there for an amount, and it's gonna depend on how much the tax is gonna generate over the 15 years. And I would defer to
Okay.
the finance in terms
Mr.
of the
Gerber, you have
projections.
that, I think you said those figures earlier, but,
Making the assumption of 7.5 million for infill sidewalks and 4.9 for Topeka Boulevard, that puts the total projected projects at 253,300,000,
and that is how much over the expected revenue?
13.3 million.
All right. 13.3 million, so we
assuming
should,
16 million
right?
per year over 15 years.
So we have to find a way, or we have to reduce the amounts by 13.3 million. It's like budget night. Mr. Brown?
Well, I don't know exactly how close this would get us, but I would make a motion to reduce the funding for the Kansas Expo Center to 40 million and reduce the funding for the county trail system to 13 million to fund the two unfunded projects.
To 13 from 12 and a half.
Or,
I'm sorry, the,
But that's
thank you.
Oh, okay.
so the expo goes from 45, did you say to 30?
Just
40, I'm sorry. I had trouble finding
Can I restate my motion?
it. All right. But, there hasn't been a second. How do you want to state this again?
May I restate my motion?
Sure.
My numbers were incorrect.
All right.
I would like to make a motion to reduce the funding on the Kansas Expo Center to $40 million and reduce the funding on the county trail system to $7.5 million to see if that would put us in line to fund the two unfunded projects.
That's a gain of 10 million,
That's a $10 million gain, yes.
$10 million gain. Okay, the deputy mayor seconds that motion. Is there discussion? I'm sorry, Mr. Schmidt?
I have to approve
You,
amendments
I'm
to my-
sorry, you have to approve. I'm sorry that I missed asking you that.
The amendment as, or the motion as presented would not add Topeka Avenue Bridge or the infill project. You would have to make that part of the emotion, of the motion, in addition to removing two other, or removing items equal to that. So I would not approve of that.
Okay, and see, my assumption was that when you moved the attachment, it had those areas in there. And I think we were putting them in at those amounts.
Excuse me, Mayor, not the amounts, just the
Okay,
projects.
Just the projects,
Yes.
all right. So we need to clarify that motion to add in, your motion is out of order. If you would like to make it again, differently.
I'm not sure I want to make it again. I'm need maybe a little bit of clarification on how I'm supposed to make this motion.
I
I'm not
think-
quite sure at this point.
You would move to make those changes, like you're adding in Topeka Boulevard at 4.9 million,
Okay.
and the
I'm-
infill sidewalks at 7.5.
Yes, that
Okay.
is my motion.
And then,
That was
and
my
then you're
motion.
going to reduce the Expo Center by 5 million,
Yes.
and the, what's the other one? The trails, county trails by 5 million.
Actually, it was 7.5.
I'm
million,
sorry,
I believe, Mr. Mayor.
7.5, you're correct. All right. Is there a second? Did you second that? Did you? No, okay.
I think I guess I thought the number for the county trail system was down to 7.5 million, not being reduced by 7.5 million, so I need clarification.
Yeah, it-
5527.
It's to 7.5, and I may have stated that incorrectly. Isn't that correct, Mr. Brown? The new amount for the county trail system would be 7.5 million. Or were you reducing it by?
Let me do my math again here.
That's true.
I
It's, I see, I think that would make.
I believe
us
it
up the
would be
difference.
reduced to $5 million.
It would reduce it to 5 million, and that would get us close to the 13.3.
assuming all those are accurate, Mr. Mayor, assuming all those numbers, 5 million for county trails total, 4 million for the Expo Center, 7.5 for infill, 4.9 for Topeka Boulevard, that brings the total to 240,800,000.
Okay. Give you 1 second. You do one. No second. Seeing no second, the motion.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Manspeaker seconds. Mr. Schmidt?
I can't support this. My emphasis in creating this proposal was that, that quality of life issues that affect all people in the county that are gonna be paying this tax should take precedent. And while I'm not opposed to adding those two projects, I am opposed to removing funding for things that affect the entire county in order to fund them. So, no, I will not support that.
Mr. Manspeaker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really confused. So everything that we want to do to change this, we have to clear with Councilman Schmidt?
If you want to,
If you
excuse me.
want to make, our rules are, any amendments have to be approved by the person who makes the motion for amendments. You don't have to do that for a substitute motion, but that's in our rules.
I thought we already passed his motion. This is a second motion?
This is a motion now on the, to approve the attachment A, his attachment A.
Gotcha. Anybody want to make a motion to reconsider?
The resolution, you mean?
Mr. Schmidt?
The total right now, if we included the 4.9 for Topeka Boulevard and 7.9 for infill sidewalks, was that 253.7?
And Councilmember Schmidt, 253.3.
253.3. So we need to come up with about $13 million somewhere in this.
Mr. Schmidt?
I don't know if I can amend my own amended attachment A. But I would point out that there is a road project for $13.7 million that would balance the budget for the entire resolution that's already passed. I don't think I can actually make that motion to amend it, but I would support it.
Yeah, Mr. Manspeaker?
If I could just point out, and I don't want to put words in county commissioners' mouths, but they didn't include the county trail system on their budget, but they did include Northwest Rochester Road. So my guess, if we put county trail system on and take off Northwest Rochester Road, this will be a done deal for them. They won't want to be on board with us. Just my suggestion.
Mr. Brown?
I would make that motion to remove the county trail system from attachment A and at 12.5 million to fund and include the infill sidewalks at 7.5 million and Topeka Boulevard Bridge at 4.9.
Okay. that motion has been made to remove the county trail system at 12.5, add in the infill sidewalks at 7.5, Topeka Boulevard at 4.9. Is there a second?
He has to approve it.
Well, I usually I'd get a second. If there's no second, he doesn't get the chance to say no. Ms. Delisla seconds, okay? Mr. Schmidt?
No. For my attachments, as I've stated in all of these meetings, it's going to have to come from the infrastructure cuts and not the quality of life components that were at the priority of all of the public expression. So no, I wouldn't support that.
Deputy Mayor?
Just so I can get some clarification, we are currently discussing attachment A as a substitute motion, and it includes a listing of infill sidewalks as well as Topeka Boulevard, but no dollar amounts attached to those. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
And so if we call the question and move forward, we would vote this up or down, and if it fails, then we start over.
Yes.
I would call the question.
Okay, the question has been called. Everyone has had an opportunity to, I believe, to speak. So we're voting on the motion to approve or make attachment A, the substitute motion for the infill sidewalks. All those in favor vote yes, those opposed vote no. Mr. Harmon is gone, I vote yes.
We have 5 yes and 5 no.
Okay, fails to pass.
4 yes,
Four yes.
5 no.
No, mayor voted no. Or, I'm sorry, mayor voted
I'm not
yes.
up on there.
Sorry, yes.
I vote on
Sorry.
the interlocal agreement,
5-5.
although I don't vote on
Yes.
the earlier, the resolution.
There's
My
a double
vote
S.
is a no. I thought we were voting on calling the question. So, no.
So 5 yes, 5 no.
Either way, it fails.
4 yes.
Yeah, so it fails.
Mayor voted yes.
Yes.
You voted
You
yes?
voted yes, correct? Mayor? Yes.
Oh,
So it's 5 yes, 5 no.
okay.
Oh, gotcha.
I think you need to
Shall we,
revote.
shall we
Yes.
revote? I
And
think,
there,
yes.
should we vote first to call the question?
yeah, there has to be a vote to call the question. And once
All right.
that vote's made, then there's a vote on the question if it passes.
Okay, yeah. The question has been called. All those in favor of immediately voting, calling the question, vote yes. Opposed, vote no.
We have 8 yes.
Eight having voted yes, the question is called. We'll now vote. Okay, we're voting on the attachment A as presented. All those in favor vote yes. Opposed, vote no. I vote no.
Thank you.
Yes. It's this one.
Yeah, just,
Can you clarify the end? We're voting on attachment A
That's right.
as
This,
I proposed it?
That's
With
correct.
the 2 projects.
with the 2 projects in at
But
zero
at
funding.
zero
Right.
funding.
At 0 funding. I'm not sure if my vote registered, but
Yes. Mr. Schmidt, what were you voting?
I was voting yes.
Yes. 2 yes
Wouldn't
and
matter.
6
All your
no.
votes count.
7 no, actually.
All right. 6 having voted no, it does not pass.
So you're,
So we have before us attachment A. Mr. Suplet?
I was just gonna clarify. Original attachment A does not include Topeka Boulevard, does not include infill sidewalks. So if there's desire of the body to include those projects, then there would need to be an amendment
That's
to the
point.
attachment to include them.
That's correct. Mr. Van Speaker?
Motion to amend to add infill sidewalks, and do I need to add an amount to that?
Sorry.
I think we should. He asked about, he's adding infill sidewalks, and there should be an amount.
Should be an amount unless you want to take two separate votes.
Yeah.
To make things easier, could I just go 5 million on the infill sidewalks, reduce it by 2.5
Yeah, I
million?
think,
Then we
yeah.
have to find less money somewhere else?
Right, it could be any amount.
Everybody, that's where I'm gonna head with this, so that's
Okay.
my amendment. Infill sidewalks for $5 million.
And that's it, no
That's it.
more, no, not taking anything out
this is
or
the
just
original.
doing this one.
That's all I
Okay.
got right now.
This is, Joey's the second. Okay, we, yes.
If I could clarify, City Attorney Sablet, we're making reference to page 62 of the book that's been handed out. It does include Topeka Boulevard funding of $4.9 million. I will also state that. I have to sit closer.
But the motion is that we're substituting.
Right.
Yeah, we're on the original attachment A, which is attached to the agenda. It's part of the interlocal agreement. It is the original attachment A. There was a substitute.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Well,
We are back then on the original attachment A.
Yes.
Thank you.
page
I'm sorry I
62.
interrupted, but now I'm with you.
oh, man.
Okay, and so, Mr. Mayor and Council, if I could clarify, it does include the Topeka Boulevard project at $4.9 million. In addition to that, just from an information perspective, we have the Bikeways Master Plan in at $3.2 million because of a grant that received today that will benefit us to about $200,000. We would be able to reduce the Bikeways Master Plan number by $200,000 to bring that down to $3 million, just from an information perspective, if somebody wanted to make that, take that action.
Okay, I guess we didn't really make your motion, and we can second, so it's, right, seconded, okay. And that was to add infill sidewalks. The 5 million. Okay, we have a motion on the table to add infill sidewalks at 5 million.
Yes.
And this page, the total of this page, the total amount of this page is
240 million, Mr. Mayor,
without the 5 million for the sidewalks.
without sidewalks.
Okay. Okay, we're together on this. Is there discussion? Ms. Hiller?
Are we going to just do one thing at a time at this point, or are we still insisting that this whole thing balance with any motion?
The motion is to add the infill sidewalks at 5 million
Period.
at this point, yes.
Okay.
Mr.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. If I could just clarify again, we are working off of a projected revenue number for 15 years, which we've estimated at $16 million a year. This current cycle, we will probably end with $10 million surplus revenue in this budget. So we don't know what the final number is going to be. If this body was to make a determination to add the $5 million and have a budget of $245 million, we don't know whether that's the right number or 235 million, but we would have a prioritization, and if we don't have the money, we can't do the project. If we have too much money, which we have had this year, we'll just do a split at the end.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. You know, we could sit here all night trying to get down to a specific amount, but we have, within the interlocal agreement, it describes how to handle the situation if we don't have enough money, correct?
Correct. And Mr. Mayor, just to
And-
clarify, we're going to be having that conversation with the county now.
Yeah.
We're projecting with a high level of confidence that we're going to have at
Yes.
least $10 million left over from the current project.
Okay. So we don't need to cut them. We're sort of together in our conversation, that perhaps therefore we could just act on this and add the 5 million for infill sidewalks and go with it. Mrs. Hiller?
I don't think we can, because we've got to reconcile back to the resolution. In our resolution, the Northwest 46th Street is not in there. The county trails are in there. The numbers have changed. I guess we could ignore that, but we've still got some reconciliation to do with the resolution.
Okay. Is there a way, another way to
We can
work through this? I think there